Hey, good afternoon. I'm Mark Bridges, the new Vice Chair of the IAT. Thanks for joining us for another virtual InsureCon session. I hope you enjoyed our keynote session that just ended with Steve McKee. If you missed it, all the sessions are going to be recorded and will be available on iat.org on Monday. Our session this afternoon is called COVID-19 and Workers' Compensation. It's being presented by IAT strategic partner, Texas Mutual. As we all navigate the unique situation that coronavirus is posing for our communities, Texas Mutual is standing strong in its commitment to supporting Texas employers and communities who rely on them for work comp coverage during this difficult time. Last month, Texas Mutual distributed $2 million to 47 nonprofit organizations across the state that are on the front lines of COVID-19 relief efforts. This includes Meals on Wheels, United Way, local food banks, community health organizations, and many more. In April, Texas Mutual distributed $330 million in policyholder dividends, and they did that 2 months ahead of their normal schedule to support over 57,000 policyholders during this critical time. Joining us today from Texas Mutual for this discussion on COVID-19 and work comp are Eric Berkwin, the Vice President of Safety Services, Curtis Johnson, Vice President of Claims, Jackie Kenyon, Vice President of Special Litigation, Jeff Lentz, Senior Vice President of Underwriting, and Jeanette Ward, their Chief Operating Officer. Now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Jeremiah Bentley, the Vice President of Marketing and Community Affairs at Texas Mutual Insurance Company. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate that intro and everybody for dialing into the call. I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists to turn their cameras on and join us on the virtual stage. I'm Jeremiah Bentley. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Community Affairs at Texas Mutual, as Mark said, and I'll be playing the role as your host and moderator for today's discussion. We appreciate everyone for being on the call, and we look forward to sharing the work comp perspective as it relates to what we're doing in our challenging times. And I also really appreciate the special partnership we have with IAT and with the independent agent community as a whole. I'm going to go over a couple brief housekeeping items with you. The first half of the session, we're going to hear various perspectives from across the organization on the COVID-19 pandemic from members of our leadership team. Then we're going to open it up for questions from you. So if you have questions during the presentation, go ahead and enter them in the question box on your control panel on GoToWebinar, and we'll be collecting those all throughout. So if you hear something that you want to ask a question about, go ahead and type it in and we'll get to it at the end. With that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with Jeanette Ward, our Chief Operating Officer. She's been with the company more than 25 years in a wide variety of roles throughout the organization. She's a proud graduate of the University of Texas. You can see her diploma fairly over her shoulder there. And she's going to share the executive perspective on the crisis and our response. So take it away, Jeanette.
All right. Thank you, Jeremiah, and thank you, Mark. Thank you, IAT, for having us today. So I want to kick us off kind of talking about Texas Mutual's response to this crisis. First, I'm going to quote our CEO, Rich Gergasco. He said, "Our mission has always been to create a stronger, safer Texas, and that mission is more important now than it ever has been." And I couldn't agree with him more. So what we've done, first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that all our employees were able to be safe and continue to serve you and your clients during this time period. Whether it be quickly issuing policies, making those policy changes that you need, providing safety resources very specific to the crisis, in addition to what we already do, and also taking care of injured workers most importantly. And we've also worked to make sure all of our agency partners have the information they need to help the businesses that you serve during this crisis where it relates to workers' comp. So you can go to our website. We have a little banner with a link to lots of information, and we keep that information up to date. I think for a while there, we might have been updating it on a daily, if not every other day basis, to make sure you have at your fingertips what you need. Back to our employees, we really wanted to make sure they could continue to serve all of you, as I said. So very fortuitous investments that we made in technology the last few years really paid off. Whether it be investing in our digital capabilities, paperless or collaboration tools. The fact that we already had a work from home program for at least 2 days a week. Our underwriters, claims adjusters had the ability with soft phones and their laptops to work from home. It really made that transition to work from home, which we're all still doing for the most part, very seamless. We have around 1,000 employees across the state, Houston, Dallas, Lubbock, and Austin. And except for some essential employees that had to come in the office, we flipped the switch and started working from home seamlessly. So yay technology, it really helped us in this case. And as Mark mentioned, we also wanted to do something immediately for our communities. So we committed that $2 million in grant funding to nonprofits across the state that we knew would be critical to help in this COVID-19 time period where people really needed relief. 40 different nonprofits, as he said, and a lot of those nonprofits also happen to be policyholders, and we also collaborated with a lot of our agent community to identify which nonprofits in the different communities across the state, from El Paso to Lubbock, Dallas, Houston, and a lot of places in between, were doing the work that was needed during this time period. And there was a lot of gratitude. There were some tears shed. So that help was really needed, and we were glad we could contribute. We also, in addition, donated $50,000 to All Together ATX, which is a partnership of Austin Community Foundation and the United Way for Greater Austin. And that's really focused on helping folks in Central Texas struggling during this time period. And Mark also mentioned the early dividend payout. You know, our policyholders, we have over 70,000, your clients, they're the backbone of the Texas economy, and we knew they were probably struggling as well. So it was really important to us to go to the board of directors and request approval for $330,000 million dividend payment. And then we worked really hard with our internal team. I want to thank them because they got that payment out much quicker. It's quite a laborious project to get all of that out. But 57,000 of our policyholders were able to receive their dividend checks 2 months earlier than usual, because it was really important to us that we got that money in the hands of policyholders as quickly as possible. So here we are now. We're starting to talk about return to the office, like a lot of other Texas businesses. What does it look like? How are we going to do it? You know, what is the new normal, as they say? So we have specific plans for each office location depending on the health situation in those offices. So I'm in Austin, and I'm actually in the office. As much as I love Texas Mutual, I do not have a lot of Texas Mutual art hanging in my house. So I'm in the office, but you'll notice a lot of other folks are at home. So we're going to make the right decision at the right time to bring people in where we can keep our employees safe. And then we're also working on making decisions around when we'll start interacting and being able to visit the agent community and customers again. Right now, we're serving them remotely. You'll hear more about that. But being a workers' comp company, obviously safety is paramount and critically important. So we'll make those decisions, and we'll keep you all up to date as we decide how we're going to do that. So on behalf of Rich, the board, and the rest of the leadership team, I just want to thank the agent community and IIAT for your partnership. I hope you enjoy the information that we or find value in the information that we're going to convey today, and we look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you very much, Jeanette. I think one of the things that hopefully came through on that is just the importance of being a mission-focused company, you know, and really giving back to the community and policyholders and serving agents and our employees. And that's one of the things I've always really enjoyed about sort of the way we do things at Texas Mutual. One of the things you'll notice on here is a lot of the folks in this call have also been with the company for a long time. So I think it probably means it's a pretty good place to work too. And I'm going to bring one of those up next. Next, we'll hear from Jeff Lentz, who's our Senior Vice President of Underwriting. Jeff, I believe, started working for Texas Mutual back when we were with the fund, right out of college, and then had like a brief time in the wilderness for 7 or 8 years. Came back in 2004. He was promoted to Senior Vice President of Underwriting just this year, and he is here to share how we continue to work with our agent partners now in the future. So let's hear your perspective, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeremiah, and thank you to Mark and IIT for having us today. Let me start with how underwriting is really shifting to this remote work world and what that looks like now as we start to, as Jeanette said, figure out some semblance of what the new normal is. As Jeanette mentioned, we were very prepared to transition to remote work. Most of our underwriting team already worked remotely at least a few days a week. Overall, it was a very smooth transition for our underwriters. Quite frankly, work today looks a lot like it did before. I think the biggest difference is the virtual meetings versus in person. Obviously, that's a difference, but on a day-to-day basis, our underwriters, our agency specialists, they're going about their business in the same fashion they did before. Really, the biggest difference, I guess, is more barking dogs and kids photobombing video conferences. But I think that's been kind of fun to see people in their natural environment. Another thing that helped us transition to remote work and maintain a high level of service to our agents is our automated processes. Our underwriting operations are highly automated, with much of what our agents send us being handled without anyone having to touch it. Our systems also allow us to very easily shift work around from underwriter to underwriter so that we can make sure that we're taking care of our agency partners. During our remote work time, our IT partners have been very hard at work, continuing to build on our automation, working with our underwriting team and making very good headway on expansion of automation for policy changes and expansion of auto quoting. So this is a win-win for everybody. It's faster turnaround for our agents and policyholders, less work hitting our support staff and our underwriters' desks, so they can focus on providing the highest level of service and personal touch. Although too much screen time can be draining at times. I know I've had a couple of days where it felt like I was in front of the screen for 8 straight hours, and although I didn't move, I felt exhausted at the end of the day. It's also been very beneficial to us. Our agency specialists and underwriters, it's helped them to stay in touch in a more personal way than a traditional phone call. Our agency specialists, they're out on the road, they're out in agents' offices, they're doing visits. So they were really the area of my division that was the most heavily impacted by the stay-at-home orders. However, with go-to meetings, other virtual meetings, it's allowed them to maintain some face-to-face engagement. I think the meetings that probably were the most special to the underwriters and the agency specialists were the virtual calls they did with agents and policyholders to do a virtual dividend check delivery. It's very gratifying to know what you do is having a positive impact, and the reaction that we've received from our policyholders and agents have been outstanding. So I know that those video calls where they could see the reaction of the policyholders and the agents have been very meaningful to the staff. Another area where we wanted to make a positive impact had to do with how we adjusted our payment and cancellation policies during this crisis, and then how we're gracefully returning to normal operations today. Like many of our peers, we tried to take swift action to provide relief to our policyholders by eliminating late fees, suspending cancellations, things of that nature. As we ease back to some semblance of normal, we're doing so in a way that continues to offer grace to our policyholders who are still challenged by the effects of the economic shutdown. You might be wondering what impact the pandemic's had on our book of business. As you would expect in a line that's heavily dependent on payroll, we are seeing declines. At the outset of this, we did a countless number of modeling sessions to try to project out what we thought the impact of the pandemic would be on our premium. We modeled scenarios back from the last recession. We looked at the last downturn in the oil and gas market, and quite frankly, we're thankful at this point that the impact has not been as great as we forecasted. We're still monitoring, watching. So although top line premium writings will be down this year, we're well positioned now and for the future. With the reduction in payroll and the stay-at-home orders, we naturally also saw a decline in our claims volume, which has a positive impact on the bottom line. So I won't get into that too much, so I don't want to steal Curtis's thunder. He'll talk more about claims in just a moment. I'll conclude with a quick update on our plans for resuming office visits. Jeanette touched on this. We're going to continue to evaluate the data and balance out the pros and cons of resuming in-person visits. At this time, we're still doing everything virtually, but this could change if the data supports that we can do so safely for our employees and that our employees are comfortable with it. Everybody has a different situation and different take, so we're going to be very mindful of our employees as we make these decisions. So again, thank you for having me and the rest of the Texas Mutual speakers today, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.
All right, thanks for that perspective, Jeff. It's good to hear about the business. And said, we all look at the premium reports every day and are, I think, encouraged by what we see. As a reminder for everybody, if you do have questions, which we've gotten a couple here, but we would love more, please go ahead and type them into the chat box, and we will we'll respond to them all at the end of the presentation. Jeff mentioned that Curtis will be talking about claims, and so let's bring him up now. Curtis Johnson is our Vice President of Claims Operations. He's responsible for our adjusters all throughout the regional offices, as well as our specialized catastrophic team in Austin that deals with the very serious claims. Curtis hasn't been with us quite as long as some of our other speakers, but he's fit right in with us. He's going to speak to how we're serving clients and processing claims during this time, as well as touch on our approach to dealing with COVID-19 claims. So the floor is yours, Curtis. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremiah, and good morning, everybody. I've been with the company for about 5.5 years, so it seems like a long time, but I'm delighted to be here. I've been immersed in COVID-19 coronavirus claims for 3 months now. And so what I want to share with you today is how we're handling COVID claims and what is our processing of those claims, our shift to virtual claim handling, which Jeanette and Jeff referred to, and the process we use to make compensability decisions, and our commitment to customer service, which we call mutual care, and a little bit about the overall trend with claim volume, COVID, and non-COVID claims. First, I'm going to share with you just a couple of stats. In the United States, we've got about 2 million cases, COVID-19 cases in. And in Texas, we've got 5 counties that have been significantly impacted. And they are Harris County, we got about 15,000 cases, Dallas County, about 12.3 thousand, Tarrant County, 6.4 thousand, Travis County, 3.8, and El Paso, 3.5. And those bottom 2 have fluctuated, in and out of the top 5. But those are the top 5 counties that we've encountered. At Texas Mutual, we've got over 400 cases, which we've closed about 2/3 of those cases already. We got our first case on March 17. We had 4 claims in on that day, and it's increased since then. We found that the hardest hit industries are the healthcare workers, food processors and meat packing plants, emergency services, healthcare workers, first responders, and then senior citizen homes, which I was a little bit surprised about. So we've tried to be as effective as we possibly can in processing those claims, keeping track of what's coming in, and then communicating to the EC, our executive council, about what's happening, how many we got coming in, and all those kind of things. And we handle those claims very similar to how we handle other communicable diseases. And we look at the injured workers' activities and any recent travel they might have had. For instance, if they work in Austin and they've traveled to Italy or someplace like that, then that's sort of something we want to take a look at. We also want to know, did they test positive for the tests and the dates of those tests? And were they exposed to people who were sick, and what are the circumstances around that? We also want to know who that source patient is, who the person is that they might have contracted COVID-19 from, and that's important to us. And we also want to know about the occupation of family members, spouses, and folks like that, because as I indicated, healthcare workers are prone to contracting the disease. And if one of our workers who works in some other industry is married to someone who's a nurse or a doctor, could they have contracted the disease from their spouse? Also, what we do is source tracing, and we look at the activities of the injured worker, where they've been, who they interacted with, to see if there's some other source other than contracting the disease at work. We found in our cases that the most prevalent cases are with first responders, with medical professionals, and then third, the general population. And we take a look at that because we think that the circumstances are a little bit different. You're in general population, it's less likely than if you're a first responder or a medical professional that you contracted the disease at work. So we look at, and when we look at the employment situation where they might have contracted at work, we have some instances where we call them cluster claims, where there's a multitude of people within a plant or a factory or in a medical setting where several people get sick. That means that it's likely, unless there's some other cause that we find, that they contracted the disease from at work. And also, if they work in healthcare areas, when they're dealing with these sick patients, it's more likely that they might have contracted the disease at work. Someone comes in who's COVID-19 positive, and they had interaction with that person, and then they get sick, it's likely that they might have contracted the disease at work. There are situations where they may not have contracted at work when they're the only one. No one else at work, no other source, no other patient or sick person that had any interaction at work. And then finally, it's unlikely if they have a family member who might have been sick and who presented with symptoms before our injured worker presents symptoms. I did want to say that when we shifted to a virtual claim processing environment, it was relatively easy. As Jeanette said, we were working, many of our staff members, 2 days a week. So when we transitioned to 5 days a week, it was a fairly easy transition for us. Initially, we had a couple of minor technical issues, but we got beyond that within a week and we were off and running. So that wasn't a major problem for us. I did want to share with you that we take the COVID claims very seriously, and we look at each claim individually. And I want to share with you the folks who we have in the what we call a BRT, a benefit review discussion. We have our Senior Vice President of Policyholder Services. We have our Senior Legal Counsel. We have our Medical Directors, Safety Services Vice President, Network and Medical Managers, Legislative and Regulatory folks in the meeting. We have our nurses, Vice President of Underwriting is in there, adjusters, and also myself. And we talk about each claim individually to make the compensability decision based on those factors I talked about. What are the circumstances they contracted the disease? With regard to our customer service focus, when COVID-19 hit, we knew that we had to live up to something that Jeanette said back in 2017. We have worked hard on moving away from a process-driven organization to a customer-focused one. And so when we were challenged with COVID-19, we really wanted to make certain that we lived up to our values in terms of mutual care. That is, we're allies with the injured worker. We collaborate with all parties, the injured worker, the employer, the medical provider. We show empathy and respect to build trust with the injured worker. And we also educate them and the policyholders on the workers' compensation system, how it works, and what are the next steps, that kind of thing. So that was important to us. When we communicated acceptance of the claim or denial of the claim, we wanted to treat the injured workers with dignity and respect. The final thing I want to talk about is the trend, what's happening. And as you've heard Jeff say, we saw a decline in claim volume. We were getting, back before March, we were getting about 175 claims a day. And during the summer months, we see our claim volume increase. Well, it started to decrease significantly. We're getting about 102 claims per day several weeks ago. And then it started to climb up a little bit when the economy opened up a little bit. We saw our claim volume start to creep up, not where it usually is, but it's moving in that direction right now. So to summarize, we handle COVID-19 claims similar to the way we handle other claims. We made the transition to a virtual environment fairly easily. We have a benefit review team that gets together with a talk about compensability. With the devastating effects of COVID-19, we thought that mutual care and our customer service initiative was really important to us. And we also saw a decline in claim volume, a significant decline, and we're starting to see a an increase. What I've learned from all of this is that our folks have worked really hard over the last several weeks. We didn't miss a beat. We really, and it was the adjusters mainly who really worked at home, kept the productivity up, paid attention to our customers, and done a really nice job. So, Jeremiah, that's all I got today.
All right, thank you, Curtis. And we'll have a couple questions for you too, but we'll wait till we get through everybody here. And I really, yeah, it's been really good to observe from afar, obviously, all the hard work that the claims team's been doing to make sure that injured workers receive the care they need, and that we're dealing with these all on an individual basis. I've been on a lot of those calls. They're super interesting discussions, and you guys are doing great work. You know, one of the things that we're all hyper aware of right now is the importance of personal and employee safety during this time. And so next we're going to hear from Eric Borkwin, who's the VP of Safety Services. Eric's been with Texas Mutual for over 25 years in a variety of safety related roles. Eric usually splits his time between Lubbock and Austin, and he probably enjoys the fact that he's had a lot less commuting via the company jet, which is Southwest Airlines, during this time. And he's got to spend more time with his family at home. So he's going to talk about the critical role his team plays right now and will continue to play in the future.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Thanks, Mark and the IAT, for having all of us here to share our success and experiences as we face this unprecedented time. When I look back at some of the challenges in the shift to virtual, Jeremiah, Jeanette, Curtis, everybody has mentioned that because of our organizational planning and investment in technology, we were positioned extremely well to succeed. In the safety service arena, we're a little bit different than some of the other business units. As with most carriers, our safety professionals typically are home-based. So those folks were working out of a home office and then going out to service customers. So it wasn't as big a transition for them. But what the big transition was for them is from shifting from mostly face-to-face, where prior to this outbreak, we might have done about 20% of our outreach and consultative service telephonically. It was a shift to 100%. But with our technology advancements and investments, we were positioned perfectly for this. And I go back to one of the applications we use, Teams, and we didn't probably understand it and utilize it to its fullest extent. I see Jeanette nodding to that. And it's after about 2 weeks of that, I was just amazed about the abilities there and how much it helped me better communicate with my peers, with my staff, with external customers. We've had our field folks, home-based field folks, providing the continuation of service to all of our customers and using a multitude of avenues. We've been doing some assisting with hazard surveys using Apple device and the FaceTime ability to do a virtual walkthrough and provide guidance to policyholders. We've used our Teams applications and consultative video chats, even to the point where the policyholder didn't have the web camera enabled, but we could still do the video chat using the Teams application, and the consultant had the ability to screen share where they could share some loss runs, review a safety program, point to some very specific opportunities to help control accidents and keep employees safe. Ultimately, out of this whole kind of transition, I feel like we've become better communicators, communicating more frequently, more personally, more effectively, and more efficiently with both our internal partners and our external stakeholders and customers. Jeremiah's group and our safety services staff have done a phenomenal job in bringing all of our resources together to help create a one-stop shop for you, the agent, and the policyholder out there. When you look at our website, texasmutual.com, there's a link right there at the header, COVID-19 link, and we've consolidated resources, added additional resources in there to make it very simple. Consolidated most of the CDC and OSHA guidelines and recommendations to help make it a little simpler, because it can be overwhelming in navigating the web to try to find the resources that are needed to support businesses. We recently, to support our policyholders, completed a webinar back just recently on the 26th, and we featured Dr. Ed Bernanke, who's a a professor with the Department of Population Health and specializes in this arena. And Dr. Banaki led a webinar for our policyholders where we had a thousand, just shy of 1,000 registered participants to share information on what they can do to better position their business, protect their workers, and get prepared for the transition back into the workforce. It was such a success that we're planning on doing a series of 3 more webinars. We will alert all you guys through our normal social media aspects and marketing efforts when these come available, and we encourage you to take advantage of them too. I get questions quite frequently about what are the best practices that we should share with our workers, whether we're looking at our own agency operations or the customers that we all serve. And I think I boil it down into just about 4 basic things to always put on the forefront. And social distancing is number 1, to maintain those protocols. No matter if you're in the office, at the grocery store, visiting a friend or a family, maintain that proper social distancing. Utilize your personal protective equipment where appropriate for a job or a task in an environment. That could be something as simple as a face covering. Depending if you're in a medical facility, that could face shield, gloves, gowns, shoe coverings, etc. So it's somewhat of a hazard assessment into the environment that the business is in and what we should employ. We do it. I always thought of myself as being very clean, but I don't think there's a germ on my hands with the amount of time that I wash it, and it's just the reminder of the hand washing and utilization of hand sanitizer. And most people, I think now, instead of having a pack of gum in their console, everybody has hand sanitizer in the console of their vehicle, so they're appropriately protected. And it always, wherever you're at or working, sanitize and decontaminate so you don't transmit in your work life or your personal life, because you don't want to put others at risk. When we shift a little bit about and focus on returning your work to business, returning your business to work, pardon me, it's best to refer to the CDC guidelines and OSHA guidelines, and they will mirror each other. CDC is going to be the most stringent. State guidelines, or each state is going to have a little different variation of that. I recommend CDC because they're the most stringent and developed to keep everyone safe. Observe and implement the best practices I referenced. In a true business environment and in supporting your customers and our customers, it's always recommended to do a hazard assessment of the work activities to ensure you're identifying the proper personal protective equipment. Conduct the daily health checks. Don't let people come to work that are sick or feeling ill, whether it might be allergies or not. Require the use of face coverings in the workplace to minimize the spread. And one thing we might not think about sometimes is building ventilation. So evaluate the building ventilation to ensure that there is adequate ventilation. Everybody's referenced it just a little bit from the return to work perspective for us and into the field. And Texas is a large state, and I think you heard everybody mention there's areas that aren't as affected. And as we work as a leadership team together, we're working very diligently to put plans in place that are very flexible and applicable to the different areas. And our field folks will be equipped with the appropriate PPE to ensure that they're protected, and we will adhere to customers' requirements and expectations when we get to that point, and we will work as quickly and as safely as we can to get our folks back out there to serve your policyholders, our policyholders in the great state of Texas in a very, very safe manner. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeremiah.
Hey, Eric, I just noticed the OU helmet in the background. I thought we'd agreed to take that out when the practice run, but
well, we did, but hey, there's a I can't do like, there you go. That's a UT football underneath it, so it offsets each other, and I don't want to offend anybody.
There you go. Appreciate that. Yeah, it's been kind of wild getting used to leaving the house with a face mask just as much as like keys, phone, and wallet, but it's just like part of the new reality that we all, face in order to stay safe in the environment we're in. So our final speaker before we open it up for questions is Jackie Kenyon. Jackie's a VP of Special Litigation in the Office of General Counsel. Jackie's been with Texas Mutual for over 20 years also in a variety of roles in the legal department. And she's going to share some information, particularly around the interplay between the workers' comp and employers' liability policy. That's her area of expertise. And then she'll share a little bit on whether, how this pandemic may or may not cause any differences in that interplay. So let's hear from you, Jackie. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremiah, and thank you, Mark and the IIAT for having us. And it's officially this afternoon now. It's afternoon. So employer's liability is part 2 of a workers' comp employer's liability policy. And the rights and obligations conferred on the policyholder come from the contractual language, the Texas Workers' Comp Act, the Texas Constitution, and case law. So just as a little bit of background, Part A of the policy, workers' compensation, is no-fault insurance, and it's a statutory scheme. It kind of came around at the beginning of the last century. It's called, in some places, the grand bargain. And so in exchange for benefits for on-the-job injuries without having to prove fault, the employee had to give up his right to sue the employer for at-fault accidents. But there is a statutory carve-out that allows an employee to sue for a work-related accident. Well, I shouldn't say the employee. The statutory carve-out is actually for fatalities, and it is for the spouse and the heirs of the body, which is legal speak for natural children and not adopted children. And it allows them to sue for a work-related fatality if the employer is grossly negligent or for intentional conduct. Now, gross negligence is a lot higher standard than mere negligence. And in fact, there's a statutory definition, which I'm going to read to you because it's too long for me to memorize. So it has to be conducted by a vice principal of the company for there to be liability on the employer. And a vice principal is going to be somebody that has the authority to hire or fire, or like a head of a department. That person has to commit an act or omission which, when viewed objectively from the standpoint of the actor at the time of the occurrence, involves an extreme degree of risk, considering the probability and magnitude of potential harm to others, of which the actor has actual subjective awareness of the risk involved, but nevertheless proceeds with conscious indifference to the rights, safety, and welfare of others. So boiling this down to the real world, what might gross negligence look like? So one example that comes to mind is, say you have an employer that's a trucking company, and a vice principal of that company allows a driver to go behind the wheel that they know is intoxicated, and then the driver has a fatal accident. That would probably meet the gross negligence standard, because we as society objectively know it's dangerous to let drunk drivers drive, and the vice principals subjectively should have known that as well. So part 2, the employer's liability policy provides 2 benefits to the policyholder. And the first one is the duty to defend if they are sued for a work-related accident. So the duty to defend is broader than the second benefit, which is the duty to indemnify. Duty to defend means that we'll provide a lawyer to defend the policyholder if they get sued. We'll pay for the defense costs, and we'll also help in the fatality situation with the OSHA investigation. Now, there are some contractual exclusions from coverage. So we don't defend when it's alleged to be an intentional act. We don't defend for liability assumed by contract, which would be a promise to indemnify another party. That's usually your general liability insurance that would cover that. We don't cover employment-related claims like retaliation, discrimination, wrongful discharge. That would be your EPLI. And then most federal claims are excluded unless the right endorsement is added. Now, the duty also runs to the named insured and not to the individual employees of the insured, but the employees would still have the exclusive remedy defense. The second benefit of the employer's liability is the duty to indemnify. and that's for the claims brought by the spouse or natural children in a fatal accident where the plaintiffs prove gross negligence or the carrier agrees to settle the claim. The most we will pay are the policy limits, which is on the declaration page, and it's usually either 500,000 or $1 million. As it relates to COVID, there is actually a policy limit for disease, also usually a max of $1 million. But there's an interesting exclusion in the policy or limiting language. So if there's more than one fatality related to a work-related disease, all the plaintiffs are collectively limited to split that $1 million. So say there's 2 fatalities, the 2 spouses, all the children, collectively limited to $1 million. Now, as I mentioned, the duty to defend is a little bit broader than the duty to indemnify because the carrier must defend the policyholder if they are sued for a work-related accident, but they will only ever have to indemnify if it's brought by the spouse, the natural children for a fatality. So we'll defend claims brought by the parents, the estate, and adopted children in a fatality, but we won't pay that claim because the exclusive remedy is a statutory defense to that claim. The judge should dismiss it on summary judgment. Additionally, sometimes the injured worker, it's a non-fatal accident, and sometimes they'll sue the policyholder for negligence. Again, the workers' compensation exclusive remedy should be a defense to that claim. And then lastly, sometimes people will just sue for simple negligence. Well, the statutory carve-out for employer's liability is limited to gross negligence, and so the negligence claims also get dismissed by the exclusive remedy bar. Now, since the COVID outbreak, how has this practically affected our employer's liability department? Well, it's a very small department. It's 2 workers' comp adjusters, and I am their supervisor. We do have an EL committee that meets regularly, and Curtis and Eric are part of that committee, and we'll discuss claims and settlement proposals. But Gene and Mike are my 2 adjusters that handle these claims. They're very seasoned employees. They too have been working from home for 2 days a week prior to the COVID outbreak, so they adapted pretty well to work from home situation. And if we do get a claim, a gross negligence claim, they'll be in contact with the policyholder. They walk them through the steps of what to expect, and really great at explaining what the process is. So far, we've only had 1 COVID lawsuit, but we'll see what happens from here. And with that, I'll pass it back to Jeremiah.
All right, thank you, Jackie. I'm sure those items have raised some thoughts and questions in the mind of our viewer. We appreciate everybody, viewers. Yeah, that's viewers. That's what we are. Everybody listening and submitting questions during the presentation. I'm going to give you all a couple more minutes to get questions in, and I'm going to ask an open-ended thing of anybody that's on the panel that wants to jump in. And that's, can y'all reflect on something you've learned about either your work style or your team's work style during this time that maybe surprised you?
It's interesting to see who will willingly go on the camera when you call them at the last minute and who keeps their camera off. I'm a full open book. I'm camera ready from the moment I get up for the most part. So anyway, that's been kind of funny.
Yeah, it's been funny to see everybody kind of change their dress attire as we got home and got comfortable. The first few weeks, it seemed like I would still wear a collared shirt and such, and then I started seeing other people, and I think up until maybe this week, I'd been in gym shorts and a t-shirt environment in most settings. So people have gotten comfortable and relaxed.
Yeah, this is the nicest I've seen Jeff since the whole thing started.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
Jeff, other than getting your haircut today, you touched a little on the productivity. What have you seen on the underwriting side of things?
What I've seen is the underwriting team really come together with our agency specialists to try and reach out to our agents and just really try to meet their needs during a difficult time. And just back on the other question, I found that t-shirts are wonderful work attire. And I've not worn a button down or a pair of slacks in 3 months, and I don't miss it one single bit.
I've noticed
All right.
our folks do more of the virtual happy hours and things like that, which they miss one another, and I miss them too, to be honest with you. And so I learned that how important that is to us.
Yeah, has anybody seen anything or done anything creative in terms of engaging with them, your employees during this time?
We played bingo. And then also some of my other folks that report up to me have had scavenger hunts in their house.
Same here.
I like it. I like it. All right, well, let's get to some questions. I like the first question. Well, it's not really a question, so this is the kind I like. As a board member for Meals on Wheels, we greatly appreciate your contribution. Our fundraising efforts that were planned this year had to be canceled. Thank you so much for your generosity. Yeah, that's a good question. We'll give Debbie Bryant a gold star on that one. Jeff, I got a couple here, underwriting related. The first one's, what's the status of premium volume? Has there been any significant decrease?
Yeah, it really hasn't been as steep a decline as what we expected. I mentioned that we forecasted this thing out, trying to look back at history to give us a guide for what the future may be. And one thing we've learned about coronavirus is it's been very unexpected, and nothing turns out exactly the way we expect. So right now, the premium declines have been very manageable, very moderate. So we feel like that we'll need to watch it over time. We'll see some things on audit that are going to have an impact. We'll see some policy changes as time goes on. We are unfortunately seeing a lot of companies going out of business. And my hope is that as things recover, those businesses will reemerge and come back. And so it's so far, given the circumstances, it's not been near as dramatic as what we thought it might be.
All right, thank you. The next one's for you too. Will Texas Mutual allow elimination of payroll for time paid but not work by employees not working? For example, restaurant employees that are paid to not work while the location is closed.
Right. Yes. There's actually a filing that NCCI has done on a national basis. The Texas Department of Insurance put it out for comment, but they've not approved it yet. And it actually defines what payroll would be picked up versus what wouldn't. In a traditional world before coronavirus, there were rules that would stipulate that certain downtimes would still be considered payroll that we would pick up. But there are specific carve-out rules now that are being developed around that. So we took a position very early on that if we had furloughed employees that had been sent home and were not working in any capacity, but the policyholder, out of the goodness of their heart, decided to keep them on, that we would not pick up that payroll.
All right, thank you, Jeff. I'm going to go to Curtis now for a couple. Curtis, are there any trends as far as the claims reserves on the COVID-19 claims that we've accepted? I mean, are they huge? Are they small? Like, is there anything we've observed so far related to that?
Yeah, they are relatively small. What we found is that initially many companies were sending in claims as a precaution, and in several instances, folks were not even being tested. They were being quarantined without being tested. And so, and also many companies are continuing wages, so that even though they are out of work 14 days or 20 days or something like that, the employer is continuing wages. In addition to that, some of our employees have paid for the testing. And so our exposure hasn't been that significant.
All right, thank you on that. And this next one, it may be for you, or it may be for Jackie, or it may be for nobody on this call. It's about workers' comp claims related to diseases, and basically, we treat this disease, COVID, any differently from any other, disease as far as the standard for being an accepted claim?
No. We do a thorough investigation. We want to determine, was the disease contracted in the course and scope of employment while they were furthering the business of the employer. We go through that whole rigorous exercise. And we also, when I talked about, we had our medical directors and helping us understand Could they have contracted at work or elsewhere? And we have our senior legal counsel in those meetings. So we look at the claims in totality to make certain that they were caused by, in the course and scope of employment. Jackie, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, that's causal relationship that it's related to the workplace. And it's my counterpart that's the senior legal advisor that Curtis works with. So I'm employer's liability and she's workers' comp.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Jackie, this next one's for you, and I think it's probably kind of the same answer, but I don't know. I had dreams of being a lawyer, but it did not work out. So are the gross negligence lawsuit thresholds any differently on COVID-19 or on disease than any other threshold?
No, it's going to be handled the same way as any employer's liability case would be. You'd have to show gross negligence. Mere negligence is not enough. And then we're going to look at the coverage A side too, if to see if it was found to be a compensable claim.
Okay, and then can you clarify the $1 million limit thing? I had a question about that too, about how that works as far as multiple fatalities.
Yeah, it's an unusual provision in the policy that only relates to the policy limits for disease. But so basically, they have to split up the $1 million limit. So it's not each fatality gets $1 million, it's that collectively any fatality for that employer would be limited to $1 million.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's unique.
I have a follow-up question. Within the policy period or per incident?
I would say, well, with COVID, because it can be cluster claims, and so we're gonna have to wait and see if we have a situation like that arise, and then, you know, because I can imagine like somebody gets it in March and then somebody gets it the next February from a different source at work. That, you know, I'm not sure how that's going to pan out, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. I hadn't thought of that before.
Okay, Jeff, again, it's a lot of people that apparently care about underwriting stuff. How are we working with Argo in relation to states that are making changes to their workers' comp rules due to COVID-19? California specifically called out.
Right. We're obviously, the partnership with Argo has not changed at all throughout this process. One thing that I think is good to clarify is we make all the underwriting decisions as it relates to what we write in out of state. It's not a we run it by Argo thing. So we've got the pen, so we decide what we write in other states. So as we got into this whole pandemic and we started seeing what various governors or legislatures were doing around presumptions, we started looking at what those presumptions were, what they were related to. Some of the classes of business that were having presumptions, we don't choose to write other states' business on, so those were easy. Some of these presumptions for the agents that are working with out-of-state policyholders, they can get quite broad. So we've asked to have some restrictions on some of that. So we've got our underwriters looking at them. We've closed down a little bit of our automation so that we could make sure that we had people take a look at them. So we're really looking at it jurisdiction by jurisdiction and making sure that we're making prudent underwriting decisions to protect not just us, but our agents as well and policyholders that may be venturing into jurisdictions that they might not be aware of what they could be at risk for.
Right, thank you for that. So we're starting to run up against the end of our time. I've got 2 more questions I want to get to, and then we'll get it back over to Mark to wrap it up. So Jeff, one's for you, and that is, has TDI approved to omit COVID claims from the EMI calculation?
I do not believe they have approved that one either. TDI has a pretty rigorous process they go through with filings from NCCI. I fully expect, although I can't guarantee that probably will go through, but I don't believe that one has gone all the way through the process yet.
I agree with you, Jeff. I know that it takes a couple of months to get that done, but we've heard about it. We haven't really talked about it very much because it's not been approved by TDI yet. At least we have not heard that it has, but that will be a good thing if they do.
All right. Thank you. Hey, Curtis, it's good you talk because you get the last question too to wrap us up here. And that is, can you share what effect COVID-19 is having on first responders, 7704 and 7720? Are they more affected than others in general, or kind of in line with what we've seen in other industries?
They are somewhat more affected with the claims that we have, and that the criteria that we use for first responders are a little bit less stringent than we do for the general population, and they happen to deal with, the general population when they're sick and that kind of thing. So we've seen, they're about a third of the claim volume that we have in, and more of their folks who contract the disease, they're compensable claims. And so others who contract the disease may not be compensable because of the circumstances. When we look at the circumstances in totality. So a third of the claims and the percentage of those claims are more compensable than others.
All right, thank you, Curtis. I appreciate y'all being here and answering these questions. Jeanette, I should give you the chance to say the last word if you want to, but I won't force you to. Do you have anything you want to wrap up with?
No, I really hope all the agents out there listening to this found some value in it, and reach out to any of us anytime at Texas Mutual. We're continuing to be here to serve all of you and your clients. So we really appreciate you.
Yeah.
And
Thank the panel. I'd like to thank the folks that asked the questions. I'm going to ask y'all to shut your cameras off, and we're going to bring Mark back up to wrap it up.
All right, thanks, Jeremiah. I appreciate everybody that participated in this today. Jeff, I want to introduce you to a term that I heard called hard pants. Hard pants are what you wear when you go back to the office, as opposed to the soft pants you've been wearing while you're at home. Also have another announcement. My good friend Janice Cothran at Texas Mutual said, please be sure and let my corporate team know that I am a very much needed asset and doing an outstanding job for Texas Mutual. So I have done that, and I'm sure she's going to email me here in a minute, being mortified that I said that. Again, thanks to everyone at Texas Mutual. Just a quick reminder, we have another session. It's our final session today. It's a cybersecurity best practices, gain big wins with little effort. It's going to start at 1 p.m. There's still time to register at iat.org/InsureCon if you want to attend. And for those of you who can't, I hope you will join us next Thursday for our second day of our virtual InsureCon. Thanks again to Texas Mutual, and have a great day, everyone.